They lied to me for 8 years, used my name, my future, and my dreams like they meant nothing. Also, my sister could sip champagne in Paris while I worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. My name is Elena. Wherever you're watching from, stay with me. Have you ever sat in a room full of people who share your blood and suddenly realized not one of them ever truly loved you? In our family, Christmas dinners always looked picture perfect. Sparkling lights, polished silverware, laughter that somehow felt just a bit too rehearsed. But that year, the mask finally slipped. My grandmother raised her wine glass and almost jokingly said, "Good thing your parents paid off those student loans, huh?" I froze. My fork hung in midair. "What loans?" I asked slowly. I had dropped out during my sophomore year because I couldn't afford tuition. Mom's hand started shaking. Her wine glass tilted, spilling deep red across the white tablecloth. Dad's fork clattered loudly onto his plate. The entire room fell silent. Then my uncle, clearly amused, muttered, "Wasn't that your responsibility?" Shame surged through me like fire. My ears rang. I couldn't get a word out. But Grandma, her smile disappeared in an instant. Her eyes locked onto my mother. "I've sent you $50,000 every year since Elena turned 18, she said, calmly, but with a force that cut through the room like a blade. "Mom, please," my mother whispered, her voice cracking. But Grandma wasn't done. She stood, tall and unshaking. "I want everyone to hear this," she said. "They used that money to pay for Ava's honeymoon in Paris, and for Brian's brand new BMW. Then she looked straight at me. "Not a single dollar went to you." I didn't cry. I just nodded. Then I stood, legs trembling, heart splintered, and said, "Thank you for finally telling me. I was never one of them anyway." And I walked away from that long table of lies and stolen futures. The winter wind outside felt warmer than the air in that house. They thought they broke me, but all they did was wake me up. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there on a thin mattress in my tiny studio apartment, staring at the ceiling as if it owed me answers. No Christmas tree. No gifts. Just the soft hum of a mini fridge and the weight of betrayal pressing hard against my chest. $50,000. Every year. They could have saved me. Instead, they used my life as a blank check. I thought back to the year I dropped out, how I told Mom I couldn't pay for school after my financial aid collapsed. She sighed and said, "Well, maybe college isn't for everyone." She said it like she was doing me a favor. I remembered coming home from a late shift at Waffle House to see Brian revving that BMW in our driveway. I remembered Ava's photos from the Amalfi Coast, captioned #newlywedbliss. Back then, I used to tell myself they deserved it. That maybe I just wasn't working hard enough. That maybe I was the failure. But now I knew the truth. They built a castle from my bones and handed the keys to someone else. The next day, I went to the public library, logged onto one of those old computers, and I started digging. I didn't have money. I didn't have connections. But I had something they never thought I'd find. Clarity. I pulled up my student loan records, checked every grant, every financial transaction tied to my name. And there it was. A trust fund, set up by Grandma when I was a baby, disbursed in yearly payments starting when I turned 18, all marked for education, all routed through my parents, every dollar gone, redirected, lied about. I printed everything, receipts, deposits, withdrawals. Then I took a bus to Grandma's house. She opened the door in her housecoat, her hair still in curlers. But when she saw the folder in my hands, she stepped aside without a word. I laid the papers out across her kitchen table, one by one. She didn't speak. She just sat there, hands shaking, eyes scanning the evidence. Finally, after a long silence, she looked up and said, "I trusted them." Then her voice broke. "They told me you were studying abroad in Switzerland." I laughed once, short, bitter. "The closest I got to Switzerland," I said, "was Googling their flag from the break room of my second job." Her expression hardened into something I hadn't seen before, something final. And in that moment I knew. Hell hath no fury like a grandmother who realizes her blood has been betrayed. The moment she saw the truth, something changed in her. She slid the folder back toward me, rose from her chair, and walked into her bedroom without a word. I heard drawers opening, hangers clattering, a suitcase being unzipped. When she returned, the curlers were gone. She wore a long dark coat and a look that could cut glass. "Let's go," she said. "To the bank." I almost laughed. "You don't have to." She cut me off. "They stole from you. Lied to me. Misused a legal trust. That's fraud. Let's start there." At the bank, she didn't ask for a manager. She demanded to see the branch director. We sat inside a glass-walled office while she laid the documents out, one by one. Her voice was clear, cold, and deliberate. The woman behind the desk blinked. This is serious." "Good," Grandma replied. "Because I want it taken seriously. I want my money returned, her future restored, and the people responsible held accountable." It was the first time in my life someone had fought for me like that. That day, they didn't just file one police report. They filed two. One for breach of trust. One for fraudulent misrepresentation. But Grandma wasn't finished. She called her estate lawyer, the same man who had helped her establish the trust years ago. By that evening, we were sitting in his office. He flipped through the documents, his expression tightening. "They lied to a fiduciary body," he said. "This isn't just theft. It's a criminal misuse of designated educational funds." Grandma simply nodded. "Then let's burn it all down." Just 24 hours earlier, I was invisible. Now I was in a legal war room with an 80-year-old woman as my personal wrecking ball. That night, I returned to my apartment. The lights flickered as I turned the key. My coat smelled of frost and burnt coffee. But my chest, it didn't feel heavy for once. It felt like a weapon. I looked at myself in the mirror. Dark circles, chapped lips, but a fire in my eyes I hadn't seen since I was 17. They thought I'd stay quiet, that I'd keep scrubbing floors and smiling through cracked teeth. But they were about to learn. The daughter they buried in silence was walking back, fists full of thunder. By New Year's Day, everything had changed. My parents didn't know yet. Not about the investigation. Not about the fraud statement with Grandma's signature. Not about the financial records I had uncovered, copied, and handed to the lawyer. But they would. The lawyer advised us to wait until the formal notice was served, so they couldn't move assets or cover the trail. But Grandma had grown tired of silence. She invited them for dinner, just like she always did in January. Only this time, I sat beside her at the head of the table. Dad walked in first and froze when he saw me. Mom followed, already holding a glass of wine like a shield. Ava, tan from her winter escape in Paris, blew me a fake kiss. And Brian smirked like he was still 13 and I was still the forgotten sibling. We all sat down. The table was full, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and tension so thick it made the gravy stiffen. Grandma raised her glass. "To family," she said evenly. Then added, "and to consequences." Dad chuckled. "That's dark." Grandma didn't smile. She reached beneath the table and handed them a thick envelope. Mom opened it first. I watched her face drain of color, then flush, then go completely blank. "This," she stammered, "this is private." "No," Grandma replied. That was my money. That was her future. And that was your crime. Ava leaned in. What is this? I answered, calmly. It's every dollar Grandma gave for my education, which you used for Ava's wedding, Brian's car, and your vacations. Brian gave a nervous laugh. Okay, but isn't it all the same pot? We're family. That did it. Grandma stood. You stole from her. You lied to me. You lied to everyone. I trusted you with her future, and you chose luxury over loyalty. Mom finally snapped. We were just trying to do what's best for all our children. Stop, Grandma cut in, voice like thunder. You never treated her like your child. You used her struggle to finance your favorites. Silence fell. Even the walls felt like they were listening. Then I stood. I looked my mother in the eye and said, You didn't just steal money. You stole time. Time I'll never get back. While you sipped champagne, I was bleeding to pay rent. Grandma placed a hand on my shoulder, and for the first time in my life, I felt seen. Truly seen. I suggest you get a lawyer, Grandma said as she turned to leave. And a conscience, I added. We walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. They weren't family. They were strangers wrapped in gifts and lies. And soon the world would know it. 2 weeks later, they were served. I was at work, restocking a shelf of off-brand shampoo, when my phone buzzed. It was a photo from Grandma. Mom standing on her front porch, face slack, arms crossed tight over her robe, as a county official handed her a manila envelope. The subject line on the document read, Notice of Civil Investigation, Misappropriation of Trust Funds. I just stared at the screen. I thought I'd feel joy. Or victory. Something big and satisfying. But all I felt was quiet, like a storm had finally passed. And I was still standing. That night, I walked 5 blocks home in the cold, past the bakery I used to clean for minimum wage, and I let myself cry, not because I was weak, but because, for the first time in years, I wasn't pretending to be okay. Back at Grandma's house, the real work was just beginning. Depositions, bank statements, phone calls from lawyers who suddenly remembered my name. Grandma's lawyer dug deeper. What he uncovered turned my stomach. Over 7 years, my parents had embezzled more than $350,000 from the trust Grandma created. Enough to pay for 2 of Ava's honeymoons, send Brian to private golf school, and fund 4 luxury cruises for themselves. And all that time, I was working the night shift at a gas station, skipping meals, drinking tap water, rationing my asthma inhaler. They sat smiling across from me at holiday dinners, pretending they hadn't gutted my future. Then came the press. Somehow, the story leaked. Retired schoolteacher exposes family in shocking financial betrayal. People began to whisper. Co-workers stared. Customers glanced sideways. One man at the register asked, You're the girl from the article, right? The one whose parents... I didn't answer, just scanned his toothpaste and said, Have a nice night. But that moment stayed with me. Not because of what he said, but because I didn't flinch. For the first time, I wasn't ashamed. I wasn't hiding. They stole from me. They lied to my face. They robbed me of years like they were picking fruit from a tree they never thought I'd climb again. But I did. I was still standing, still rising. And now, the world was watching. The girl they left behind wasn't just surviving anymore. She was about to win. It all came crashing down on a Tuesday. My mother called first. Not to apologize, but to beg. Her voice cracked over the line like brittle glass. Can you talk to Grandma, please? She's freezing our accounts. We can't access anything. I stared at my cup of instant coffee, as if it held the last warmth I had left. Then I said, "You used my future to fund your vacations. You don't get to ask me for favors." She went quiet, then whispered, "But it was never personal." I laughed, dry and hollow. "You stole my name, my education, my chances. You gave them to people who never lifted a finger. It was always personal." She didn't call again. By Thursday, Ava and Brian had both posted Instagram stories in black and white, quoting scripture about family loyalty and enduring storms. But nothing could spin what came next. A judge ordered a full audit. Every gift, every check, every transfer Grandma ever made. It was undeniable. The BMW, titled under my father's name, the same year Grandma sent $50,000 for my second semester. A $7,200 Parisian hotel? Booked just days after I emailed them, saying I'd dropped out and needed help. They never even responded. Now the house was on the market. The BMW had been repossessed. Ava's credit cards declined. Brian, the one who once called me mediocre, was caught on video screaming at a Starbucks barista because his app wouldn't load. Their world was cracking. And I was watching from the safety of Grandma's living room, her hand wrapped gently around mine. She said, "You're going to be okay now." I didn't reply, because okay wasn't the goal anymore. Freedom was. Not just from debt or deception, but from the need to prove myself to people who never saw me. The girl they left to drown? She built herself a raft. And now, she was learning to swim through fire. They weren't losing money. They were losing access to me. And that was the one currency they could never recover. The morning of the hearing, I wore a black blazer from Goodwill and scuffed boots. Ava arrived in pearls. Brian wore sunglasses indoors like it was still some kind of game. My mother's hands trembled the entire time. My father. He wouldn't even look at me. The courtroom smelled like cheap polish and panic. Grandma sat beside me, spine straight, gaze steady. When the judge asked if anyone wished to make a statement, my heart pounded in my chest. I hadn't planned to speak, but I stood. Each step to the podium felt like walking on broken glass. But my voice, it didn't shake. "I dropped out of college because I couldn't afford tuition," I said. "I worked 16-hour days, ate rice, drank tap water, skipped medical appointments. I begged my parents for help, and got silence. Meanwhile, they used the money meant for me to fund international vacations." I paused. They didn't just steal from me. They made me believe I wasn't worth saving, that I was a burden, that I was the reason things were hard. And I believed them. For years. My throat burned. But now I know the truth. They didn't fail to help me. They chose not to. I stepped back. The room was silent. Every word echoed like thunder. The judge didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, restitution will be enforced. Accounts will remain frozen. Assets liquidated. Funds rerouted to the intended recipient. Ms. Elena Hayes. My full name. And for the first time in my life, it felt real. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters called out. But all I remember is breathing air that no longer belonged to them. That night, I took the long way home, past the college I once dreamed of graduating from. But I didn't feel bitter. I felt free. Because sometimes, justice doesn't look like revenge. It looks like survival. With receipts. It looks like peace. Without apology. And it sounds like your name being spoken aloud in a courtroom, not as a victim, but as someone who finally rose. They say silence is golden, but the silence after truth? That silence is justice. 3 months later, I walked into my new apartment. It wasn't much. 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, a view of a gas station. But it was mine. Rent paid. Utilities on. Groceries stocked. A check on my desk. The restitution had cleared, $187,000. I didn't touch it right away. I just sat with it, like a letter from the girl I used to be. The girl who cried under flickering lights at her night shift. The one who watched her siblings' live dreams bought with her stolen future. Now she had choices. Now she had a name. Every Sunday, Grandma came over with lemon bars and stories. One afternoon, she handed me a manila folder. Inside were college brochures. "If you ever want to try again," she said softly, "I'll co-sign this time." I didn't cry. I just nodded, because we both knew. This time it would be my decision. My parents lost the house. They moved into a rental an hour outside the city. Ava blocked me on every platform. Brian tried to DM me once. I didn't open it. They can keep their silence. I've outgrown their noise. Sometimes I still hear my uncle's voice. "Wasn't that your responsibility?" Yes, and I handled it with more grace than they ever deserved. Because I didn't just reclaim what was taken. I built something they could never reach. Not with guilt. Not with gossip. Not with money. Freedom doesn't come wrapped in a bow. It comes wrapped in broken glass, long nights, and scars no one ever sees. But it's mine now. And when I walk past mirrors, I don't flinch anymore. I see a woman who was left behind, and still made it out. Not bitter. Just done. So if anyone ever asks how it ended, tell them, she walked out of the fire, holding the ashes of everything they tried to bury her under, and she never looked back.